Welcome back to 18 through the Psalms. I want to comment on Psalm 90 this morning. Quite a serious reflection this morning, but we've got to be true to what we're reading. This is a psalm by Moses, the only psalm that we have from Moses himself. And you've got to picture the scene as Moses is writing these words. This is probably near the end of his life, where he has spent 40 years in the wilderness watching however many adults there had been of the sort of million-odd Israelites, however many of them were over the age of 20 at the time when they refused to enter the promised land through unbelief. And God had said at that time, okay, you don't have faith to go in, you don't trust me, that I will protect you and I'll give you victory. I've just brought you through the Red Sea on land and you can't trust me. Okay, fine. This whole generation of adults will not enter the promised land. You will die in this wilderness, and your children, who you say are going to be killed by the giants, they will enter in after you. And that was the final word. And Moses had seen 40 years of that rebuke, of that discipline being meted out. And he had seen every single one of those adults, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of them, one by one, drop off and die in the wilderness. And he had learned from hard experience that God is not to be toyed with. So you can understand, if you can picture that, the sternness and unwavering nature of God. You know, as parents, we are so quick to change our boundaries. You know, those of you who've had toddlers, you'll remember when you said to your toddler, put that down, and then they don't listen. Put that down right now, or I am going to, and then you give some threat. And then you say, I'm going to count to 5, and then you go through that whole thing. And the toddler is learning, you know, when mom says, put that down the first time, she doesn't really mean it. You know, then they sort of learn how far they can stretch it. And God is not like that. God speaks once, and if there is disobedience, he follows through on his promises and his threats. And this is what Moses has seen through hard experience, 40 years in the wilderness. And then he reminisces, and he makes these statements, and then it concludes with a prayer. And I want to read these to you this morning. This is from verse 7 of Psalm 90. For we have been consumed by your anger, and by your wrath we are terrified. You have set our iniquities before you, our secret sins in the light of your countenance. For all our days have passed away in your wrath. We finish our years like a sigh. The days of our lives are 70 years, and if by reason of strength they are 80 years, yet their boast is only labor and sorrow, for it is soon cut off and we fly away. Who knows the power of your anger? For as the fear of you, so is your wrath. So teach us to number our days, that we may gain a heart of wisdom. And I think this is a good reminder for us. Where is wisdom to be found in life? It is to be found in the fear of God. That is the source and genesis of all wisdom. It is the root of wisdom, the fear of God. And here in this prayer, Moses reflects a great fear of God that he has, through hard experience of life, gained. He says, Lord, help us, Lord, to number our days, to realize that life is short and God is serious. Teach us to number our days that we may gain a heart of wisdom. Moses says, who knows the power of your anger? You know, we had dinner with people the other night who are not Christians, and they're quite wealthy people, and they were reflecting on their childhood, and the wife said of her husband's childhood, oh, he grew up in a religious home, that they were always so terrified of the wrath of God, and they were. It was kind of like a ridiculous thing to them that people would live their lives scared of some God who's angry all the time and full of wrath. And I understand the sentiment, because there is more to God than obviously the wrath and anger of God. God is love. He is good. He is wonderful. He's a great Father. He's compassionate and patient, and He gave His only Son that I might have life. And He's filled me with His Spirit that's brought joy and wisdom to my life, and He's given me hope for eternity. He's a good God, and He's wonderful to serve. But we cannot ignore the scriptures that talk about the anger of God, the wrath of God. And here Moses reminds us, he says, who knows the power of your anger? Because God does get angry. God hates sin. He hates rebellion, and He doesn't make empty promises. When He says, all the world is guilty before me. Unless you repent of your sin and put your faith in my Son Jesus, you will be found guilty on the day of judgment. And on that day, my Son will say to you, I never knew you. Depart from me into the lake of fire prepared for the devil and his angels. God is serious, and hell is no joke. It is a promise. It is coming. And here Moses reminds us, he says, who knows the power of your anger? For as the fear of you, so is your wrath. As the fear of you, so is your wrath. He says, whatever fear an unbeliever might have of God, his anger on the day of judgment will be that and more. You cannot fear God enough. It is a fearful thing to fall into the hands of the living God, says Paul in the New Testament. And I think the final thing to reflect on here, so the first lesson is just spend a moment, even this morning, reminding yourself that life is short. You are going to die. 70 years, 80 years if you're lucky, says Moses. And then it's gone. Think about that. How that should change the way we live. Because you're going to be dead a lot longer than you're alive. Eternity awaits. So teach us to number our days, God. Teach us. Give us a sense of our death that is coming, and let it inform, let it change how we live. Give us an eternal perspective, Father. So teach us to number our days that we may gain a heart of wisdom. That's the first reflection this morning, and that's a prayer that we should all pray. The second, of course, is the grace of God in what He's done through His Son. Moses is saying here, we have been consumed by your anger, by your wrath. We are terrified. You have set our iniquities before you and our secret sins in the light of your countenance. You know, unless it had been for what Jesus did for us on the cross, where He took my sin off of me and He took it onto Himself, and He took His beautiful, pure white robe of righteousness and purity from a life of sinlessness that He lived. He took that and He put it over my shoulders, and He took the worst of the punishment of my sin upon Himself, so that these words during this life don't have to be mine. You know, the Israelites, most of them were unbelievers. They were not covered by the righteousness of God through faith in the promised Messiah, as Moses was. But for most of them, they experienced the wrath of God in this life, and they will experience it in the life to come. But those of us who are Christians, we don't have to experience the wrath of God. We experience the discipline of God. There's a big difference. But all of this wrath and how God, even the secret sins of people, the things they do in secret that they think no one sees, God sees it all, and He's going to lay it bare, and He will judge every one of them. These words don't have to be true of us. And I know, and I hope that you can know this morning, that those words don't apply to me. I will not see the wrath of God, and I will not come into judgment, but I have passed from death into life. It's wonderful news. And that's, of course, the good news of the gospel. So God bless you, and I'll see you tomorrow.